Welcome to Empire Building, the podcast where we talk about building big businesses and even bigger lives. I'm your co-host, Seychelle Van Poole.
I'm Wendy Papazan.
I'm Via Williams.
And I'm Sarah Reynolds. In growing a business, compensation and how you structure your team members or employees' pay can 100% determine whether or not your business not just survives, but most of you that are listening, I know, want a growing business, right? That's what we're in. Mm-hmm. It's called Empire Building. Building typically means growth, right? And so compensation so much determines whether or not your business will actually grow. I always say, and I tell my leaders often, that pay will automatically determine behavior. So if you are wanting to look get a certain behavior, you need to look at how someone is paid to ensure that their pay is structured around the behavior that you're wanting. So on today's podcast, we're going to be diving in. I say diving in a lot, I've noticed, you guys, but we're diving in today to this topic on how to structure compensation that will actually lead to a growing business. So how to pay people that will lead to a growing business.
I love that. Well, there's 4 different types of compensation. You've got commission only. You have salary only. You have base salary plus bonus and or commission. And at the end of the day, it's a W-2 employee versus a 1099 employee. And it's important to understand that. And I know I speak for everyone when I've made when I say I've made tons of mistakes in terms of paying people. And honestly, this is not my strong point at all. I think it's one of your superpowers, Sarah. But honestly, it's been a challenge for me to really even understand and figure this out. I always have to think about it really hard before I do it, and that's probably why I've made so many mistakes.
Well, let's leave it to me to ask you if you want to hear a fail story. Leave it. Via's going to probably have a fail story. Yeah, well, here, good. So I think, Wendy, to your point, I think where a lot of us make a mistake, and where I certainly have made a mistake, is that we can't envision our businesses scaled up and big. Like when we start and launch a business, we think, okay, like we're just lucky to be here. And then we just had this fluky good year. Like we don't believe it. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just projecting. And so you pay and you set compensation based on revenue. And you set it based on current revenue. And so what you fail to understand is that a lot of positions have a ceiling that it just doesn't make sense to pay them beyond that to have a really healthy net income in a business, right? You know, it's like an entry-level admin position has a ceiling. It's not worth it to have a person over a certain amount in a role, right? And so I had that happen, and I'm not going to mention the title out of respect, but it was an admin position. And when we started, I mean, I was paying like a percentage off of top line revenue, you know, to help mitigate the fact that I didn't want to pay a high salary. I didn't want to have a high fixed overhead. So I wanted to switch it to be a cost of goods sold, right? And
hold on, can we pause, Via?
Yeah, of course.
What you're saying is like so good. And I want to make sure our listeners are understanding. So basically what you had agreed to was paying on
a lower
revenue
salary
that comes in, to lower the salary, thinking that would help you net more money. Is that right?
100%. That's right. And I find most people start that way.
Lower risk for you up front, greater reward for the employee on the back end.
Most startups start that way, where we kind of want to burden cost of goods sold rather than burden fixed overhead, right? The problem is that it's really hard to do takeaway. And this particular person, I looked up one day and they were making like $80,000 a year in a position that really should have been like $45,000, right? And, you know, you try to take that away from someone, it is not a great situation or conversation. Luckily, that person actually didn't leave me. You know, we all just kind of, we figured out a win-win together, but I'm very lucky. I think most of the time they would leave. It's just very hard to ratchet. Oh, hi. I actually need you to make less amount of money. This isn't going to work because it's too much.
Thanks for working so hard and building our business.
Thank you.
Yes.
Right.
Now I'm going to do a takeaway.
It's a tricky situation. You have to try to project. And so I have another one very similar. So I have 2 fail stories from when I was launching my real estate team at the time where I did that. And I'm super careful now.
I think that is is such a common thing that I see or hear about, is because in the beginning, when you're first setting things up, it makes it, well, that makes sense. I'll just give a little bit of percentage to this person.
Yep.
But then eventually, that when you need to hire more people, when you need to grow, what ends up happening is that it stunts your growth because of the way that you set up the original person's compensation. And so it's so important to be looking at compensation in terms of growth. So.
Yeah. And this is just a lesson for every aspect in your business, which is even though you're on a dirt path right now, you always need to think about your business as a 16-lane highway. And if you can, tell your admin team, tell yourself, ask the question, would we do it this way if we had 10 listings a month? Would we do it this way if we had 20 listings a month? Would we do it this way if we had 100 listings a month? And most of the time, the answer is probably no. So if you can get in the habit of asking yourself that question in every aspect of your business, it's going to be super helpful for you.
I love that. One of the biggest mistakes we made early on was I listened to people that were ahead of me in business, but I didn't look at what their actual profitability was. And so they told me what their comp model was, and this is specifically on like our sales rep side or a sales agent if you're in real estate. And they were like, oh yeah, this is what we do for comp, and this is what everybody does. And it was a really, really high to the sales agent, very low to the business model. And we have a really robust operations team. And so the two mistakes I made early on were, number one, I didn't look at what value proposition they were giving for their business. Number two, I didn't look at all at their profitability. And what happened is I gave away the farm, but yet we were giving 10x the value of what these other companies were giving. And literally with every single sale our company made, I went further into debt. And it literally was like almost painful. It was like, the more we sell, the more we lose. This is terrible. And so, the fastest way to get salespeople to quit is to go back and renegotiate their compensation. That's like the fastest way to do it. And so I went back trying to save them, but I was not as fortunate as Via, and we had to remargin the business, renegotiate compensation, and I basically lost our whole sales force early on. And it was a super painful lesson on, comparing somebody's outsides to your insides. And I looked at the face of their business and didn't realize, A, none of those businesses were profitable, or they had zero support and administrative and operations support. And so that's why they could run on those margins, versus what we wanted to do with our business was create a much more white glove experience. And our agents are just as, profitable in their net, in their net income at a different comp model, but that's because we do a lot more on the back end. Right. But I was too naive in business and took other people's advice instead of really getting to know our numbers and our vision and our future and where we wanted to go with it. And instead just took other people's at face value. And it was a huge lesson. I'm glad I learned it early. But it was a really painful one that we learned early on.
Yeah. Anytime we go through a takeaway with a team member, you risk losing them, right? So so much of life is setting expectations. Marriage, everything in our life is setting expectations. Yeah. So when we set the wrong expectation from the beginning, you'll lose typically.
You're setting yourself up. Yeah.
Yep.
And in a way, we all are going to have to walk through this at some level and pay for this lesson. It's just a matter of how it's going to look. Hopefully, if you listen to this episode and you really think it through, hopefully we'll mitigate that lesson. But you're probably going to have to walk through it. You can't substitute experience in a lot of these cases, right?
Yeah, I agree with you, Via. Because at the end of the day, you just really don't know what you don't know. And most of us, when we're growing our business and ready to hire people, we're hiring out of pain. And so we're probably going to do what Seychelle did, which is you're going to maybe talk to one or two people who's going to give you advice, and that's how you're going to structure it. And it's really hard to imagine a situation where you're going to sit down and really look at 10, 15 people's P&L and decide which one is going to be right for you, because you maybe don't even know how to do that. But, and I'll just give a plug here for the good old Millionaire Real Estate Agent, because the compensation models in here are going to keep you from doing what Seychelle did, which is to basically go into debt.
Absolutely. on our hiring series that we did, it's been a while now, ladies. We need to talk about hiring again soon.
Yeah.
But, we talked about how most people hire out of pain.
Yeah.
I also see that most people structure compensation out of pain.
Yes.
Yes.
And so you want to be really careful when you're structuring it, that you're not doing it just solve this problem for me really quick. I'll just pay you XYZ just to get this sort of off my
Whatever.
plate, because
Yeah.
and then before you know it, you are struggling with it, right? I know Millionaire Real Estate Agent is what we have used for a lot of our compensation percentages and budget and things like that. I will say at some point you actually reach a scale above that as well, which I have, and I'm in and have struggled with at times on this compensation topic. So it's really good if you know that if your vision is to be bigger, to think bigger, and to go bigger places, you want map out the compensation when you're doing 4 times what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
What would it look like? Is that even
right.
sustainable, right? And so what needs to happen for that? So let's go over what we sort of follow in terms of how to structure compensation, how to look at how to pay someone. Such a real topic here. But the very first thing is you want to create a detailed job description. Okay. And in that job description, you want to be as specific as possible in terms of what that role is. You have a good question that you asked yourself, Via, on this, don't you?
Yeah. And by the way, this question that I'm about to throw in here, Sarah, this focusing question, if you will, is something that I continue to ask my people when I meet with them. And that question is, what is this person accountable to? Ultimately, how do they know if they're winning? How do we know if they're winning? And so often when I was just at a staff meeting last week, and we have a new ELT, executive leadership team, in one of our offices, and I had every single one of them write down, what do you think you're accountable to? And then they shared their answer, and we talked about it. Some were right, some were wrong. We talked about what the goal and the vision is for that particular office, and that frameworks the details, Sarah, I think, of the job description. That's got to be the focusing question that you're answering in creating your detailed job description. And then, of course, talking about your missing person, the perfect person to fill it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So wise. So wise. The next thing you want to do is you want to create a budget for the position. So you ask yourself, what's the market paying for a similar position? And I see people asking their cohorts across the country, what do you pay for a certain position? And that's not valuable for you.
Nope.
Because, in Austin, Texas, what we pay someone, for example, for the director of operations is going to be vastly different than, Little Rock, Arkansas. Honestly,
right.
The cost of living is skyrocketing here. I know that my husband's company, they just across the board, they did a market analysis of everybody's pay because wages are rising so quickly in Austin, and people are coming in every day trying to renegotiate, and it's better to get ahead of it. So that's the first thing you want to do. And the only way you're going to get a talented person is to pay them what they're worth. I see this all the time too. I tell people, talented people expect to be paid for their talents.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you
And
don't, someone else will.
And can we just say, men typically will demand based on what they are worth much more than females.
Yes.
And so what one of our passions is obviously amplifying the lives and voices of women in business around the world. That's what the 4 of us are passionate about. And I think a lot of that starts with as a leader, in terms of how you look at the females that are interviewing, and or you want to make sure that you are comparing it for their talents, not because they haven't demanded a certain amount.
Yes.
If I'm making sense, I'm trying to be politically correct a little bit here, and
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if that's sounding right, but that's super important as well. One of the things that I recommend is always starting at market, as Wendy said. So doing your research on what that position pays in your market, but then also painting the picture of it, them helping you with growth that's how they can grow their income. Because I know some companies have the philosophy to overpay. That in the beginning, that's not a philosophy of mine, mainly because I want them to be tied to the vision and the mission and what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish. And so I don't want them to be there just for the pay. I want them to be there to help us build and grow and impact more people's lives. And so because of that, we start at market, and then typically you will see us bump up sometimes pretty short after someone has joined us. So
I love that. Yeah. Then you want to ask yourself, is it a maintenance position or a return on investment position? This is what Sarah was talking about. Is this a position that's going to help you maintain where you're at, or can you expect growth in revenue from this position? I can remember a conversation with an executive of Keller Williams who came in and said, I want to make $1 million a year. And then that person went to that person's boss and said, well, how big does the company need to get so that this person makes $1 million a year? Okay, great. Well, you're in charge of that. If you can make this happen, we'll pay you $1 million. And I think people can be short-sighted in their thinking there, because the right person is going to take that and they're going to run with it. And so I think sometimes we maybe don't want to offer that, but like the right person will get what they want while you're getting what you want at the same time.
Yep. Yeah. I had a big aha this week on this topic. And I'm sorry, Via, but I know you were about to say something, but I had a big aha on this because I'm reading the book Scaling Up. I've mentioned it multiple times. I'm now reading it, I think, on my third time. And there's a cash flow section, and they said that the number one mistake of CEOs that are scaling up is that they don't view their accounting department as a return on investment department. And I have always told them this is a maintenance department. Like, we have to have you bookkeepers, but you don't make us any more money. Like, that's how I have viewed it. And when I read it, they talked about cash flow being the number one reason why businesses can't grow or scale, and that the department that controls cash flow is your bookkeeping and accounting department. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, like, what an aha on that. So be careful how you view it. So
that's amazing. I just had an aha while we were sitting here, which is that's actually how I am starting to view my personal accounting department, which is like my CPA and my bookkeeper.
Yes.
Yep.
And I was just like you. I was like, you have a job to do. You're going to help me, do this, pay my taxes or whatever. But now when you start to level up with your income and your success, you realize having the right person who can be an advisor and a consultant to you. I mean, that's huge. Really, so I'm personal and professional.
We're literally interviewing for new resources in that department personally right now, because ours has been a defensive position of paying the taxes from the year before, but not in the offensive position of proper tax planning for the next 1, 3, and 5 years. And it makes a huge difference when you get ahead of something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring us back to compensation, because I kind of want to stay. We were talking about, I feel like that was a little bit geared towards ops people. And I want to just spend a little bit of time on revenue and growth positions, because I do tend to spend more time on that.
That's a big, what you just said is a huge difference in my thinking. Because ops to me
you just
is
said it,
sales
actually.
driven.
Yeah.
That's the big difference with compensation in operations versus the way most people think is they view operations as a management, like just setting the stage. For my team, I tell them every person's a salesperson. So how can we take an ops position and turn compensation into growing sales?
So I'll push back a little bit. I'll push back a little bit on that. It's not a disagreement. It's more of a. I do agree. I probably shouldn't have worded it that way, but my vast experience is ops tend to feel more comfortable and better and more valued with a higher salary, lower incentivized pay. And salespeople, it's not even about feel better. They perform better with a lower salary and a higher incentive-based pay. So maybe I should have been more specific.
That's 100% true.
Yeah, yep. And so Wendy made a comment. It's a good example, because she said someone said, "Hey, I want to make $1 million." And so where I would start with revenue position compensation structuring and where I always start, and especially because a lot of you guys listening have small businesses, is we want to start with what we call on-target earnings. So we want to say, because I thought about it. I've been thinking about it for the last 3 minutes in my head, and I was like, am I going to share this? I don't know if I should share it, so I'm going to share it. So when I first met with my boss, so to speak, in 2018, and he really wanted to hire me, I said, I want to make $1 million a year income in 5 years, which is by 2023. Because he's like, why? Is it random, or is there a reason behind it? I said, well, I figured out what my wealth building needs to be and the assets I need to buy, and that's about the right amount for me to do everything I think I need to do. Plus, sounds cool. No, that's not the real reason. But it does sound kind of cool. But I knew I could hit it in 5 years pretty easily, or probably exceed it with what I was doing already. I just wasn't enjoying that, right? So I thought, well, if I know that I can hit it here. So what he did, and what I just have now modeled for the last 4 years, is he was like, all right, this is how, I said, show me how I can do that. I don't expect you to hand me a check every year for $1 million. I want you to show me in your world how I can earn that. And we we were at a restaurant, and we just kind of had salt shaker, pepper shaker, sugar packets, and we kind of grouped them all together, and we just talked about this. You're going to make this salary, this bonus on this entity. Then eventually we're going to add in this entity and this entity, then equity here, and then your real estate team here, and then other businesses you don't know about, Her Best Life being one of them. We didn't know about Her Best Life then. And so, we're going to add it, and it should get to easily, if, $1 million or exceed $1 million. And that's actually how I recommend that you talk with a really strong candidate in the growth sector, where you're talking about on-target earnings, and this is the portion you're going to earn from this. This is up to you. This is your incentivized pay. We believe this is a very good number for this year. This is good, better, best. And then walk through it that way. That's what I have done since I got into this position, which is largely dependent on recruiters. Yeah. I recruit recruiters and salespeople. And it has just been, phenomenally good for me and for the company. The last thing I'll say, because we've kind of touched on it, is a lot of the time the incentivized pay effectively feels like a cost of goods sold. They're not getting paid unless you're getting the revenue
Absolutely.
in.
Exactly.
Wherever it falls in the ledger.
And can you just pull that apart a little bit? Because maybe a lot of our listeners don't know exactly what that means.
Yeah. So if you're paying someone on an incentivized pay, so let's pretend you're hiring a salesperson, a killer, like trained killer. You want this person. So you're going to pay them a salary, and you're going to pay them, a large percentage of commission. Well, what is commission? Commission, you don't get paid commission until you make the sale.
That's right.
So if they're getting a large percentage of commission, it's effectively, it's a cost of sale. It's a cost of goods sold. It's not a fixed overhead item. You might be getting a slightly less net on that sale, but you're getting the sale. It's a top line number into your number.
It's tied to the sale.
Into your company, yeah.
Well, it is cost of sales typically in business is your largest expense percentage. And so you do want to be careful in general with how you structure that, especially depending on what value you are providing to create the sale, right? And so you do want to be careful with that. But what I like to view from a growth standpoint, it's like, do you have sort of like, this is where you've been able to take your business, right? And you bring on a growth leader that can take it much further. You can pay on the growth for that leader versus paying on what you've already built. Gary taught us this, right? Like if you're already good with what you've built so far, but you want to grow and you're hiring an outside leader to help you do that, pay on the growth is what a lot of what Via is saying in general.
Like take that, write that down. 7 years ago, I didn't do that with a growth leader we hired, and I paid them based off of our current. I was like, I need to get them there to where they want to go as fast as possible. So I paid them off of our current, and then also paid them on growth, but I was paying them off of what we were already doing. And all that did was incentivize them to keep us at status quo or grow slowly, not to incentivize them heavily. Like I should have given them more on the growth than on the current business that we were doing, because all it did was made them really comfortable and didn't push hard then for the growth on top of that. And made us grow too slow. We didn't grow fast enough. So, I mean, put a star next to that if you're looking at growth-based sales leader roles. That's a huge takeaway you should have.
And I just want to paint that picture very plainly for everybody. And this is, like the kindergarten version of that. You have built it up to this point. They don't get paid for that. What they get paid for is what they grow. Just think of it that way, right? That's how I think of it. All right.
That's beautiful.
Now the other key thing here that before we move on, but sort of to go back a little bit on anything that's sort of operational. So Via did a beautiful job explaining from a more of a revenue generating sales force and or leader. Again, the title of this is growing, right? How to pay people to help your business grow. You want to look at compensation around growth for every position. Now, this takes some creativity because some of the positions you're like, well, how do we use that, right? So like, for example, we have two that I wanted to share, that we have two sign guys that are on staff. They drive trucks all over the DC Metro, putting up signs for us, putting lock boxes on doors, right? And we wanted them to have some type of tie into the growth of the company or be passionate about it. And so we know that if we can increase sign calls, we will increase business, right? And if they put out more directionals and are more passionate about following how people find our signs and find our homes for sale, then they will be more likely to do that, right? So creating a bonus structure around an increase to a source that they have to do with, that their job has in terms of operating and or managing it, is one idea. Even asking for referrals, right? From a customer service person.
That's a big one for us.
Asking for referrals and getting bonuses around that. The point is that every position in your company, you can tie compensation to growth for what they have, what their role and sort of their control is around.
That's the keyword, control.
Yep.
What they can control. If you can incentivize more of that, that's an awesome bonus opportunity.
Yep.
I love that. So that's an awesome summary of the above the line expense, right? Being paid on growth or on something that they can control. There's also a way that you can do growth and opportunities for bonus structures, which is profitability, which is below the line. And so, there's opportunities there where you can, structure your compensation that's fair with the job, but that the bonus structure is actually around the growth and profitability. And there, I love this because it's incentivizing what every business owner really wants to see, which is a healthy, profitable, high net earning business, because if you just have a ton of sales and no profit, what's the point of being in business, right? That's not fun. We want to have a healthy profit. And so, when we look at who are good candidates for these positions, a profitability bonus is really a good opportunity for any position that has control over expenses. Your operational leaders are great with this because their base plus bonus structure on increased profitability year over year, I know for us has taken our operations team and they watch our bottom line like a hawk. Every single month they're looking at what can we redline, what can we improve, what's returning a better ROI. And I think something that a lot of us do is we look at every single expense and see if we can tie an ROI to that. Or we look at every single lead source and say, can we tie an ROI to that, or a return on an investment? But your operations team is really good when you look at profitability comp bonuses because they can help you control what the profit looks like on the bottom because they control the top line expenses.
Yeah. And that's so well said, Seychelle. And guys, this is the most important thing that you need to understand about your business is that you can't revenue your way to success if you're not managing your expenses. And I think a lot of us like growth. A lot of us, that's one of our values. A lot of us are natural salespeople. We like to see things grow. But if you aren't managing the bottom line, and honestly, guys, I had this conversation yesterday in our one of the classes that I taught yesterday. You can't revenue your way out of a hole. You literally have to manage expenses. And that's tough because you want everything to sort of stay the same. If you've got operational staff or whatever, you want to believe that you can do that. But the fastest way to profitability is to look at your P&L and you print out your bank statements every month, look at your credit card statements. And that is not fun. No. We have a monthly budget. I have a monthly budget meeting with my ops director, and It's not fun, but it's really valuable.
Well, then when you do that every single month, and then you tie the ROI conversation that Say just said, like every expense, how can I get a bigger return on that expense that you're already spending?
That's right.
Like that is where so much power comes into play.
Yes.
I remember one time I was on a panel, and my fellow panelist was like, I don't worry about the bottom number or the expenses. I just figure if the top line is good, we'll be good. And I'm like, no. I was like, please.
Like that's like makes me so nervous for them. I'm so nervous for that person.
Yeah.
The other phrase that you'll hear a lot is sales solves everything. But the problem with that is if your business isn't structured right, sales will not solve your problem. Because it will literally burn you into a hole. Yeah. But if it can, right? So you have to have sales if you're in a sales business. But if the business isn't structured properly, it's not going to solve your problems. It's just going to top line you into more expenses.
So what do we do when we have someone talented that's above our budget, ladies?
It's a good question.
So I love this topic. It makes me think of when I was listening to our brother podcast, Think Like a CEO?
Our broadcast.
Our broadcast, yes. And Jay and Gary did a whole topic on hiring talent. And I was so scared because I was looking at hiring a talented leader. And I remember them saying, like, you got to look at it as 90 days. A talented person will get you a return within 90 days. Don't think about it from the whole salary, cut it down to 90 days. And so that's really what you're looking at is, can this person get me a return and grow my business or help my business within 90 days? And try not to stress about the whole amount, but look at 90 days because they will get the return out. And so that makes me
make the math easy. So if you're paying someone $120,000, don't think of it as $120,000. Yes. Think of it as $30,000.
Yep.
That you might possibly be losing or expending or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So remember, when you're looking at someone that you want to hire, but you're feeling like you can't afford, or that their income goal is not to where you are yet. First and foremost, remember that talent will pay for themselves and get you that ROI.
Yeah. And the other thing is just be flexible. Can you reduce the number of days work to be within budget? Maybe they're a parent during the pandemic, and you can get someone really talented who wants to work from home 25 hours a week.
Yeah.
Right. A really talented person will bring a lot to the table. I mean, you'd rather have one really talented person that you're paying twice as much as two untalented people. First of all, it's just easier to manage one person. Yeah. And then you want to find out what else is important to them. What can you add to them? It's not necessarily like tangible, but it adds value to them. So maybe it's unlimited time off. Maybe, like I said, working from home versus the office. Maybe you need to help them accomplish a personal goal. Right. So maybe they come to you and they say, gosh, my whole life I've made all this money, but I don't have any wealth to show for it. Right. And you can say, listen, as part of what I'm going to give you, I'm going to become your personal wealth coach, and you're going to look up in 5 years with me, and you're going to go from being $250,000 in debt to having, a couple $1 million worth of assets.
Well, and that's exactly the last part of this, which is casting the vision, which is so good. And Wendy just gave you a very tangible example of what that looks like, because talented people want to be part of something bigger, and they want to know they're making a difference. And sometimes you can be direct and honest with them and say, you know what, our organization does not have hundreds of people right now, or it is not a $50 million, $100 million, $200 million revenue business at this point. But that's where we're heading. And I can see that you have potential to be with us on that bus. And I know that with you in the right seat on the bus, moving in that direction, you're going to help us get there faster. And so let's talk about how we can base your compensation model that when we all are growing and winning, you're winning big too. Do you want to be part of something that's growing and, going to be awesome and beneficial for you too? And let's take it there and cast that vision. And so there's an opportunity there for you, whether it's, tying into whatever it is that's important to them that Wendy talked about above. You can cast the vision then on where your organization is going. The key though is you have to be prepared to follow through on that. We see a lot of companies that cast the vision and then never do anything about it. So you got to cast the vision and then be prepared to take action, because that person's going to be fired up and ready to go. So you better be fired up and ready to go create that with them as well.
So true.
So wise. So wise.
And also, before we close out, I feel like this is a good place to just insert. I'm just going to plant a seed. We're not going to go down the rabbit hole right now. Maybe we can do another episode on it. But, the other thing is when you have a really great talent and you're trying to attract them, talking about a profits interest into equity partnership, position is a great thing to do. And it feels like the right thing to add to casting the vision. Where, profits interest is like basically they get a percentage of profit, but they're not full-on owners. However, if the owner was going to sell the business, they would participate in that. They would get proceeds that are, according to their percentage on that, and that can easily convert into true equity position as well. So that's something to think about with compensation is equity position. And an earning in, so that it's not like just handing them the keys to the kingdom. It's like saying, if you hit this milestone, we'll give you this percent and this percent and this percent, and then we'll vest in 4 or 5 years or something, and that'll turn into equity, right?
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Well, ladies, this was such a great episode. A little bit hard to recap because there was so much here. So what I'll say to recap is, number one, you need to set up initial compensation on a 16-lane highway, even if you're on a 1-lane highway, right? So just
So good.
remember to
Big
not
time.
create a permanent solution to a temporary problem with this. Try to think about the permanent long game solution the best you can. How you do that is you create a very clear and detailed job description. What are they accountable to? And you reward on that, ideally, right?
Yep.
With a compensation, you have a budget. You think about, are you going to pay compensation on top line or bottom line net profit revenue, right? And or somewhere in between. And then, just as a reminder, especially when you're going after top talent that you may not feel like you can afford or that's a lot of money, you're really only committing to 90 days, not the annual salary. I think Wendy said that really, really well. So we want to thank you for listening this week, you guys, on how to pay people to grow your empire. And we will see you next week. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, guys.